Hello everyone, welcome back to another episode of Creepypasta. For those of you who are new here, welcome. I am your narrator, Samuel. If you don't mind, please remember to subscribe if you like the story, so you don't miss any future episodes. I want to be clear about something before I say any of this. I am not the kind of person who tells stories like this. I don't listen to podcasts about hauntings. I don't believe in energy. Not the way people mean when they wave their hands around a room and talk about what they feel. I'm a practical woman. I was a project manager for 11 years. I organized timelines for a living. I kept spreadsheets about spreadsheets. This morning, I caught myself standing at the kitchen window at 7:15, waiting for a school bus I have no reason to expect, for children I've never had. And I couldn't remember when I started doing that. So when I tell you what happened in that house, I need you to understand I am not building towards some dramatic conclusion. I am not trying to scare you. I am trying to explain something I still can't make fit inside my own head, and I've been trying for almost a year now. It started, like most things in my life have started recently, because of the divorce. The marriage ended the way silence ends a radio station, not with static, just with nothing. We were married for 14 years. It ended the way a lot of marriages end, not with a fight, but with a long, airless quiet. The kind where you are sitting at the same table, eating the same dinner, and you realize neither of you has said anything in 40 minutes, and neither of you noticed. That is what killed it, not anger, just absence. By the time the papers were signed, I had already started looking for somewhere else to live. Not just a new apartment, a new place, a new town. I wanted distance. I wanted a zip code that didn't remind me of anything. I wanted to walk into a grocery store where nobody knew my name or asked how Dan was doing. I found the town. I'm going to call it Selford, which isn't its real name, through a rental listing site. It is a small place in southern Missouri, down near the river, built into the side of a set of limestone bluffs. Population maybe 2,200, one gas station, one Family Dollar, a post office that closes at noon on Wednesdays. The kind of town that doesn't have a reason to exist anymore, but keeps existing anyway, because the people who live there don't know where else to go. The house was listed at $560 a month, 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, detached garage, built in the 70s, added onto at least twice. The photos showed cream-colored walls, brown carpet, a kitchen with laminate counters and fluorescent light. It looked like the kind of house that doesn't ask anything of you. That is what I wanted. A house that would leave me alone. I drove down in February to see it. The property manager, a woman named Gail, who ran the rental office out of a converted hair salon, met me at the door with a keyring and a clipboard. She was polite, but not warm. She showed me the rooms the way someone shows you a storage unit. Here is this, here is that. Washer hookups in the hall, baseboard heat. Don't touch the thermostat above 72 or you'll trip the breaker. The house smelled like nothing, which I appreciated, but walking through the hallway, just for a second, I caught something warm and sweet underneath the nothing. Like fabric softener. I didn't think about it at the time. I asked her about the previous tenants. She paused, just for a second, the way people do when they've rehearsed an answer, and said they were a family. Husband, wife, 2 kids. They'd lived there about 4 years and moved out over the holidays. Left in kind of a rush, she said. Didn't give full notice, but they were fine. Normal people. I didn't ask anything else. I didn't care. I signed the lease that afternoon. Before I moved in, I did something that I think about now almost every day. I hired a cleaning crew. Not a regular cleaning. I called a company out of Springfield, 2 hours north, that did what they called turnover deep cleans for rental properties. They came in with industrial equipment, steam cleaners, degreasers, the whole thing, and I paid extra. I was very specific about what I wanted. I told them I want everything the previous tenants left behind removed. Every drawer liner, every shelf paper, every hook, every nail, every command strip residue. I want the carpet shampooed twice. I want the baseboards wiped. I want the inside of every cabinet scrubbed. I want the light switch covers taken off and cleaned behind. I want the dryer vent cleared. I want the bathroom caulk resealed if it is stained. I want no trace of whoever lived here before. The woman on the phone laughed a little. You want it baptized, she said. I said yes. That is exactly what I want. They came on a Thursday, 4 people. 6 hours. I sat in my car in the driveway and watched them haul out 3 garbage bags of stuff the previous family had left behind. Drawer liners, floral print, pink and cream, stacked in a pile, a broken baby gate, some expired cans of soup from the back of a cabinet, a pair of small shoes, kids' rain boots, yellow, maybe a size 4. That had been forgotten behind the water heater. When they were done, I walked through the house alone. It smelled like nothing, clean nothing, industrial steam and the faint chemical burn of degreaser. The carpet was damp, the walls were bare. Every surface was smooth and empty. I stood in the kitchen and I breathed. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was standing inside a space that didn't belong to anyone, not to Dan, not to the marriage, not to the life I'd had. Just a house, just walls and air and light. I moved in the next day. The first 2 weeks were fine, better than fine. They were the quietest 2 weeks I'd had in years. I set up the bedroom first. I'd brought a queen mattress, a nightstand, 1 lamp. I hung a curtain, plain white, cotton, and put my alarm clock on the nightstand. I don't use my phone as an alarm. I've always liked waking up to something that ticks. The kitchen I kept simple. A few plates, a set of mugs, 1 pot, 1 pan. I bought groceries at the Family Dollar and cooked small meals. Rice and beans, eggs on toast, soup from a can on the nights I didn't feel like trying. I started developing routines. That is what I do. I build structure. It is how I survived the marriage, and it is how I survived the divorce, and it is how I was going to survive this. Morning, alarm at 6:30. Coffee in the blue mug, toast. Sit at the kitchen table and read whatever book I'd brought. I was working through a stack of paperbacks I'd picked up at a thrift store on the drive down. Mysteries, mostly. Nothing heavy. Evening, dinner by 6. Wash the dishes by hand. Wipe the counter. Check the locks. Brush teeth. Bed by 9:30. Read for 20 minutes. Lights out. The house cooperated. It was quiet in the way old houses are quiet. Not silent, but steady. The baseboard heaters clicked on and off in a rhythm I got used to. The wind pushed against the windows and made them hum. At night, I could hear the river if I opened the bedroom window even a crack, and sometimes a train on the far side of the bluffs, muffled and low, like a sound remembered from childhood rather than heard in real time. I slept well, deeply, even, for the first time, and I couldn't remember how long. And then, on the 15th night, I noticed the smell. It wasn't a bad smell. That is what made it strange. It was fabric softener, a very specific kind, warm, slightly sweet, like dryer sheets, but richer. The kind of scent that lingers in hallways where someone has just folded laundry. I noticed it in the hallway between the bathroom and the second bedroom, the one I was using as a sort of storage room. I was walking to the bathroom before bed and I stopped. The smell was there, faint but definite, layered into the air like it had always been there. And I'd only just turned my head the right way to catch it. I hadn't done laundry that day. I didn't own fabric softener. I hadn't bought dryer sheets. I checked the hall closet, thinking maybe the cleaning crew had left something behind, empty. I opened the dryer in the laundry alcove, empty and cold. Empty and cold, I stood there for a moment, breathing it in. It wasn't unpleasant. It was the kind of smell that makes you think of a house where a family lives, where someone folds towels warm from the dryer and stacks them in a closet, where there is a routine built around clean clothes. I went to bed. I didn't think about it again, but it came back the next night, and the night after that, always in the hallway, always around 9 o'clock. Always faint, always warm, always just below the level where you'd call it strong, just present. Like a habit, the air hadn't broken yet. A week later, I opened the kitchen junk drawer, the one I hadn't put anything in yet, and found a sheet of drawer liner at the bottom. Floral print, pink and cream. I stared at it. I picked it up and held it. It was the same pattern I'd watched the cleaning crew pull out of every drawer in the house. I remembered specifically because the woman doing the drawers had commented on how the liner was placed pattern, side down in some drawers, and pattern side up in others, like someone had been inconsistent. This piece was pattern, side down. I threw it away. I checked every other drawer in the kitchen, all empty, all clean. I checked the bathroom drawers, clean. The bedroom nightstand, clean. Just that one piece, in the one drawer I hadn't used. I told myself the crew must have missed it. That is the explanation. They were thorough, but they were human. One liner, patterned side down, lying flat against the bottom of a drawer. You wouldn't notice unless you opened it and looked. It happens. I threw it away and I went on with my evening. But I'll tell you something. I checked that drawer again the next morning. I don't know why. I just did. I opened it and looked. Empty. I checked it again that evening. Empty. The baseboard heaters in the house were the old electric kind, long, low, mounted along the walls, with metal fins behind a slatted cover. They clicked when they turned on and clicked again when they turned off. I'd gotten used to the sound. It was part of the house's rhythm. But by the third week, I started noticing they weren't matching my thermostat. I kept the thermostat at 68 during the day and 65 at night. Simple. Consistent. But the heaters in the second bedroom, the one I wasn't sleeping in, would click on around 8:30 in the evening and run for about 45 minutes. Every night, even though the door was closed and I hadn't touched the dial. I checked the thermostat. 65, where I'd left it. I opened the second bedroom door and felt the baseboard. Warm, not hot, but warm the way a heater is warm when it has been running for a while. The room itself was noticeably warmer than the hall. I turned the thermostat down to 60. The heater in the second bedroom still clicked on at 8:30. Went to bed cold, under 2 blankets. At 8:30, I heard the click from down the hall. I got up and checked. The second bedroom heater was running. The thermostat on the wall read off. I called Gail the next morning and asked if there was a separate circuit for the second bedroom. She said no, it was all on one zone. She said the heaters were old and sometimes they stuck. She said she'd send someone to look at it. No one ever came. The heater kept clicking on at 8:30. I started closing the door to that room and not opening it. It was around this time that I noticed the kitchen light. I am very particular about lights. I turn them off when I leave a room. Always have. It is not about saving electricity. It is about order. A room you are not in doesn't need to be lit. Dan used to leave every light in the house on, and it drove me crazy, but that is beside the point. The kitchen had a single overhead fixture, a round frosted glass dome, yellowish light, the kind that makes everything look like it is 1987. I turned it off every night after I did the dishes. I turned it off and I walked down the hall and I went to bed. 3 times in 1 week, I woke up in the middle of the night and saw light spilling under my bedroom door. Not bright, dim yellowed, the specific color of that kitchen fixture. I got up the first time and walked to the kitchen. The light was on. I turned it off. I checked the switch. It was a regular toggle switch, not a dimmer, not a timer. It had been flipped to the on position. I turned it off and went back to bed. It happened again 2 nights later, and again the night after that. Each time, the light was on. Each time, the switch was in the on position. Each time, I had turned it off before bed. I was certain of it. Turning off the kitchen light was the last thing I did every night, right before I checked the front door lock. The 4th time it happened, I didn't get up. I lay in bed and looked at the strip of yellowish light under my door, and I felt something I hadn't felt yet. Not fear exactly, more like the feeling you get when you realize someone has been in your house while you were out. Not because anything is missing, because something is slightly different. A chair pushed in a little farther, a curtain pulled a little wider. The feeling that the air has been breathed by someone else. I lay there, and I watched the light, and I waited for it to turn off on its own. It didn't. I got up at 6:30 when my alarm went off. The kitchen light was still on. The switch was still flipped up. The room smelled faintly of that fabric softener. I want to stop here and say something about how I was feeling during this time, because I know how it sounds. Kitchen lights, drawer liners, a smell. These are not dramatic things. These are the kinds of things people explain away every day. And for most of those first few weeks, that is exactly what I did. But there is a difference between explaining something away and actually believing the explanation. I was doing the first. I was telling myself, old wiring, missed liner, phantom smell from the vents. I was telling myself these things because I needed to, because I had just left my entire life and moved to a town where I didn't know anyone and I could not afford. Emotionally, financially, practically, to be the kind of person who gets spooked by a kitchen light. But I wasn't believing it, not fully, because the things weren't random, they were consistent. They happened at the same times, they happened in the same places, and they had a quality I couldn't name at first, but eventually found the word for. Domestic. These weren't flickering lights or slamming doors or cold spots in the attic. These were household habits, someone's heater schedule, someone's kitchen light, someone's fabric softener, someone's drawer liners. The house wasn't doing something strange. The house was doing something familiar, just not familiar to me. The child's shoe appeared on a Tuesday. I'd been in the house about 5 weeks by then. I was doing laundry, finally, using the washer and dryer in the alcove off the hallway. And I pulled the dryer away from the wall to clean the lint trap connection. Behind the dryer, pressed against the baseboard where the flexible vent hose connected to the wall duct, there was a small shoe, not the yellow rain boots. Those had been taken by the cleaning crew. This was different. A single child sneaker, white with a faded pink sole, maybe a size 3, scuffed. The laces were still tied in a knot, the way a child ties them when they haven't learned to do bows yet. There was a small dark stain on the toe, mud or food, old and dried. I picked it up. It was light. It felt like nothing. I held it in my hand, and I looked at it and I tried to make sense of how it had gotten there. The cleaning crew had moved the dryer. I'd watched them do it. They'd cleaned behind it. They'd cleared the vent hose. They'd pulled out the yellow boots from behind the water heater. They would have seen this shoe. I put it in the trash can outside. I didn't keep it. 2 days later, I moved the dryer again to run the vent brush through the hose. The shoe was back. Same position, same orientation. Laces knotted, pink sole faded. Stain on the toe. I stood in the laundry alcove with the shoe in my hand and I felt my throat tighten. Not from fear, from something else. From the feeling of trying to do something correctly, trying to clean, trying to prepare, trying to start fresh, and being told, quietly and without malice, that it didn't matter. I put the shoe in my car. I drove it to the dumpster behind the Family Dollar, and I dropped it in. I drove home. I checked behind the dryer. Empty. I checked again the next morning. A drawer liner. Floral, pink and cream. Pattern side down. Folded neatly against the wall behind the dryer, exactly where the shoe had been. I went to see Gail. I didn't tell her about the shoe or the liner or the light. I asked about the family, the previous tenants. I said I was just curious. I said I'd found a few things they'd left behind and I wanted to know if there was a forwarding address so I could send them along. Gail looked at me the way people look at you when they know you are not asking what you are actually asking. She leaned back in her chair. We were in the converted salon, sitting on either side of a desk made from an old door on sawhorses, and she told me what she knew. The family's name was Collier, Travis and Shannon Collier, 2 daughters. The older one was about 8 when they moved in. The younger one was 4. Travis worked at a lumber yard across the river. Shannon stayed home. They were quiet, Gail said. Kept to themselves, paid rent on time, mostly. Didn't complain much. The older girl rode the bus to school. The younger one stayed home with Shannon until she was old enough for kindergarten. They lived there about 4 years. Then, right after Thanksgiving, they told Gail they were leaving. Didn't give a reason. Didn't give 30 days. Travis came by with the key on a Tuesday and said they were gone. That was it. I asked if they seemed upset, scared, if anything had happened. Gail said no. She said Travis seemed tired. She said he looked like a man who had been doing something for a long time and had finally stopped. I asked if she had a forwarding address. She said they didn't leave one. She said the deposit check she mailed to their last known address came back undeliverable. I thanked her and left. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for a while. I watched the rain hit the windshield. I thought about the drawer liner behind the dryer. I thought about the shoe with the knotted laces. I thought about the kitchen light, clicking on at a time I never used it. I thought about the heater in the second bedroom, warming a room. No one slept in. I thought about Shannon Collier folding laundry in that hallway, and the warm, sweet smell that came with it, and the way the house held onto that smell, the way a blanket holds the shape of a body after someone gets up. I drove home. I checked behind the dryer. The liner was gone. The shoe was back. I started paying closer attention after that. Not because I wanted to, because I couldn't stop. The bathroom mirror began doing something I couldn't explain. After I showered, the steam would condense on the glass the way it does in any bathroom, but it didn't condense evenly. There were clear spots, dry patches, in places that didn't correspond to anything on the mirror's surface. No streak marks, no fingerprints, no residue. Just areas where the condensation didn't stick. At first, it looked random, but one morning, after a particularly hot shower, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at the pattern of condensation and dry patches together, and I saw that the dry spots formed a rough oval at about chest height on the left side of the mirror, like a hand had been wiped across it. Not my hand, but wipe went right to left. I always wipe left to right. I cleaned the mirror with vinegar. The next morning, same pattern, right to left. Chest height, an oval the size of a woman's palm. I stopped looking at the mirror after showers. I wiped it with a towel before the condensation had a chance to form. The closet in the master bedroom had a sliding door, the kind with 2 panels that overlap, mounted on a track. When I moved in, I pushed both panels to the right so the left side of the closet was open. That is how I like it. Open on the left, where my clothes hang, right side closed, where I kept a box of winter, things I hadn't unpacked. Every morning for 3 weeks, I woke up and the closet door was open to a different width. Not fully open, not closed. Open about 18 inches on the right side, with the left side partially covered. The exact opposite of how I said it. I tested it. I pushed both panels to the right before bed and put a piece of tape across the seam where the panels overlapped. In the morning, the tape was unbroken, but the panels had shifted. The tape had moved with them. It was still attached to both panels, still sealed, but the gap was on the right side now, 18 inches, and the left side was half covered. That is the detail that bothered me the most. The tape wasn't broken. The panels hadn't been pulled apart and pushed back together. They'd moved as a unit, track and all, as if the whole frame had adjusted itself. As if the closet had a preferred position and it was simply returning to it. Then came the silence. I noticed it first on a Sunday night. I was sitting in the living room reading, and at exactly 9:15 everything stopped. Not slowly, not gradually. All at once, the heater stopped clicking, the refrigerator stopped humming, the wind against the windows went quiet. Even the clock on the nightstand in the bedroom, I could usually hear it from the living room, stopped ticking. It lasted about 4 minutes, then everything resumed. Heaters clicked, refrigerator hummed, wind returned, clock ticked. Like someone had pressed pause and then pressed play. I sat very still, and I listened, and I waited to see if it would happen again. In the parking lot, I sat in my car for a while. I watched the rain hit the windshield. I thought about the drawer liner behind the dryer. I thought about the shoe with the knotted laces. I thought about the kitchen light, clicking on at a time I never used it. I thought about the heater in the second bedroom, warming a room no one slept in. I thought about Shannon Collier folding laundry in that hallway, and the warm, sweet smell that came with it, and the way the house held onto that smell, the way a blanket holds the shape of a body after someone gets up. I drove home. I checked behind the dryer. The liner was gone. The shoe was back. I started paying closer attention after that. Not because I wanted to, because I couldn't stop. The bathroom mirror began doing something I couldn't explain. After I showered, the steam would condense on the glass the way it does in any bathroom. But it didn't condense evenly. There were clear spots, dry patches, in places that didn't correspond to anything on the mirror's surface. No streak marks, no fingerprints, no residue, just areas where the condensation didn't stick. At first, it looked random, but one morning, after a particularly hot shower, I stood in front of the mirror and looked at the pattern of condensation and dry patches together, and I saw that the dry spots formed a rough oval at about chest height on the left side of the mirror, like a hand had been wiped across it. Not my hand, but wipe went right to left. I always wipe left to right. I cleaned the mirror with vinegar. The next morning, same pattern, right to left. Chest height, an oval the size of a woman's palm. I stopped looking at the mirror after showers. I wiped it with a towel before the condensation had a chance to form. The closet in the master bedroom had a sliding door, the kind with 2 panels that overlap, mounted on a track. When I moved in, I pushed both panels to the right so the left side of the closet was open. That is how I like it. Open on the left, where my clothes hang, right side closed, where I kept a box of winter, things I hadn't unpacked. Every morning for 3 weeks, I woke up and the closet door was open to a different width. Not fully open, not closed. Open about 18 inches on the right side, with the left side partially covered. The exact opposite of how I said it. I tested it. I pushed both panels to the right before bed and put a piece of tape across the seam where the panels overlapped. In the morning, the tape was unbroken, but the panels had shifted. The tape had moved with them. It was still attached to both panels, still sealed, but the gap was on the right side now, 18 inches, and the left side was half covered. That is the detail that bothered me the most. The tape wasn't broken. The panels hadn't been pulled apart and pushed back together. They'd moved as a unit, track and all, as if the whole frame had adjusted itself. As if the closet had a preferred position and it was simply returning to it. Then came the silence. I noticed it first on a Sunday night. I was sitting in the living room reading, and at exactly 9:15 everything stopped. Not slowly, not gradually. All at once, the heater stopped clicking. The refrigerator stopped humming. The wind against the windows went quiet. Even the clock on the nightstand in the bedroom, I could usually hear it from the living room, stopped ticking. It lasted about 4 minutes, then everything resumed. Heaters clicked, refrigerator hummed, wind returned, clock ticked, like someone had pressed pause and then pressed play. I sat very still, and I listened, and I waited to see if it would happen again. It didn't. Not that night, but the next night, at 9:15, it happened again. 4 minutes of absolute silence, not the silence of a quiet house. The silence of a house holding its breath. I started timing it, 9:15, every night, 4 minutes and 10 to 15 seconds, never shorter, never longer. During those 4 minutes, I couldn't hear anything, not the river, not the train, not the occasional dog barking down the road. Nothing. The house became a sealed room, a held space, a pause. And during those 4 minutes, I felt watched, not threatened, not in danger, just observed, the way a house observes you when you walk through it for the first time, measuring you, learning the weight of your step, the way you breathe, the temperature you bring into a room. On the 5th night, I stood in the hallway during the silence, and I smelled the fabric softener again, stronger than before, warm and close, like someone standing right next to me had just come from folding towels. When the silence ended and the house sounds returned, the smell was gone. I want to tell you about the morning I found my coffee mug in the wrong cabinet. This sounds so small. I know it does. But it was the thing that changed how I understood what was happening. I keep my mugs in the cabinet above the coffee maker, left side, second shelf. That is where they go. That is where I put them after I wash them. Every time. One morning, I reached into that cabinet and it was empty. I opened the cabinet to the right, the one I used for plates, and there were my mugs. All 4 of them, arranged in a row, handles facing left. I hadn't moved them. I live alone. No one else has a key except Gail, and she hasn't been inside the house since I signed the lease. I moved the mugs back. The next morning, they were in the wrong cabinet again. Same position, handles left. I moved them back. I left a sticky note on the correct cabinet door. The next morning, the mugs were in the right cabinet. The sticky note was on the counter, folded in half. After that, I stopped moving them. I just started getting my coffee from the wrong cabinet. It was easier, and that is the part that scares me now, looking back. Not that the mugs moved, that I adapted, that I adjusted my routine to match whatever the house wanted, and I did it without thinking, the way you adjust to a new coworker's habits or a partner's preferences. Automatically, cooperatively. Like I was learning to live with someone. 6 weeks in, I invited the cleaning crew back. I called the same company. I asked for the same team if possible. I told them I wanted them to come and check their work, that I was finding things they'd missed. The woman on the phone was professional about it. She said they guaranteed their work. She said they'd come out the following Tuesday. They came. The same 4 people. I walked them through the house. I showed them the drawer in the kitchen, empty. I showed them behind the dryer, empty. I showed them the closet. Panels pushed to the right, the way I set them. I showed them the kitchen light switch. Off, everything was exactly as it should have been. The crew leader, a tall woman named Diane with a no-nonsense ponytail and clipboard, walked every room and checked every surface. She looked at me the way a doctor looks at you when your symptoms don't match any test results. Sympathetic, but firm. "It is clean," she said. "Same as when we left it." I didn't argue. I thanked them. I paid for the visit. They left. That night, the kitchen light came on at 10:40. The hallway smelled like fabric softener. The heater in the second bedroom clicked on at 8:30. The closet door was open 18 inches on the right. And the drawer, the junk drawer in the kitchen, had a liner in it. Floral, pink and cream, patterned side down. I closed the drawer. I didn't open it again for 3 days. I started asking around town, carefully, casually, the way you ask about weather or road conditions. Just making conversation. I talked to the woman at the Family Dollar. I talked to the man at the gas station. I talked to a neighbor, an older man named Dale who lived 2 houses up the road and kept a metal shop in his garage. Dale was the one who told me the most. He said the Colliers were nice enough. Quiet, the girls played in the yard on summer evening. Shannon hung laundry on a line out back. Even though she had a dryer, she liked the way it smelled, Dale said. She used a particular fabric softener. He couldn't remember the brand. That you could smell all the way from his porch when the wind was right. He said the older girl rode the bus. It came at 7:15 in the morning. Shannon would stand at the kitchen window and watch the bus pull up, then wave. Every morning, same time, same window. He said the family had a routine. You could set a clock by them, lights off by 9:30, porch light on until 10, kitchen light on in the evening until Shannon finished the dishes, then off. The second bedroom, the younger girl's room, always had a light on until about 9, then it went dark. He said when they left fast. He saw Travis loading the truck the week after Thanksgiving. Shannon sat in the passenger seat the whole time, staring straight ahead. The girls were already in the back seat. Gail waved. Shannon didn't wave back. He said the strangest thing was that after they left, he kept seeing the kitchen light on, late at night, for weeks. Even though the house was empty, he thought it was a timer. Something left plugged in. I nodded. I said it probably was. I went home. I stood at the kitchen window and I looked out at the road. I tried to imagine standing there every morning at 7:15, watching for a school bus. I tried to imagine what it would feel like to do that every day for 4 years. I couldn't, but the house could. And that is what I was beginning to understand. Things accelerated after that. Not dramatically. That is not the right word. Things thickened. The house's habits became more detailed, more layered, more specific. My towels started folding themselves. That is not exactly right. Let me be precise. I fold my towels in half, always half. Half lengthwise, then in thirds. That is how they fit in my linen closet, but I began finding them folded in thirds first, then in half, a different order that produced a slightly different shape, narrower, taller. The kind of fold you'd make if your closet shelf was shallower than mine. I refolded them. The next day, they were back in thirds. The dish soap migrated from the right side of the sink to the left. I moved it back. It migrated again. I moved it back. It migrated again. I left it on the left. The bathroom hand towel, a plain gray one I'd brought from my old house, started appearing hung from the towel ring with the tag facing out. I always hang towels tag in. Always. I've done it since I was 20. It is one of those small things you do without thinking that defines you more than the big things. Tag out. Every morning. Tag out. I started checking things before bed, the way you check a crime scene. Mug. Correct cabinet. Towel. Tag in. Dish soap. Right side. Closet panels. Right. Kitchen light. Off. I wrote it down in a notebook. Time-stamped. Documented. Every morning at least 2 things had changed. Never everything. Always 2 or 3. As if the house was being patient. As if it was only adjusting what it could get away with. And the things that changed were never mine. They were hers. Shannon's. The previous arrangement. The previous routine. The house wasn't breaking my system. It was restoring its own. There was a night in late March when I sat at the kitchen table and I ate dinner. Rice, canned black beans, a fried egg. And I looked at the plate and I realized I hadn't bought black beans. I'd bought kidney beans. I always buy kidney beans. I don't like black beans. But the can in the recycling bin said black beans, and the receipt from the Family Dollar. I checked, said black beans, and I'd eaten the whole plate without noticing. I sat there for a long time. I tried to remember being in the store. I tried to remember reaching for the can. I couldn't. I could remember driving to the store. I could remember parking. I could remember walking in. But the aisles themselves were a blank. The act of choosing what to buy was missing from my memory, as if someone had done it for me. Or as if I'd done it according to a list I didn't remember writing. The next morning I found a list. It was on the counter, next to the coffee maker, written on a piece of paper, torn from a yellow legal pad, my handwriting, my pen, but not my list. It said, black beans, 2 saltines apple juice. the big one dish soap, blue peanut butter creamy bread. White, I don't buy saltines. I don't drink apple juice. I buy wheat bread. I use crunchy peanut butter. I stared at the list. I picked it up. I turned it over. The back was blank. This was my handwriting. I could see the small hitch in my lowercase, where my pen always catches, the slight backward lean of my L's. This was my hand writing someone else's groceries. I threw the list away. I sat on the kitchen floor with my back against the refrigerator, and I pressed my palms into my eyes, and I tried to understand what was happening to me. I called Gail again. I asked her a question I hadn't thought to ask before. Who lived in the house before the Colliers? She had to check. She came back and said a man named Ed Perrin had rented it for about 2 years before the Colliers moved in. Before that, a woman named Darlene something. She couldn't read the last name. For about 3 years. Before that, it was empty for a while. Before that, someone else. Records got thin the further back you went. I asked if any of them had left suddenly. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "People move on. It is a rental." I asked if any of them had complained about the house, about things left behind, about things that came back. She said no. She said no one had ever complained about the house specifically, but she said something else that stayed with me. She said renters in that house never renewed. Not once in the 20-some years she'd been managing it. Every tenant stayed between 2 and 4 years. Every tenant left without 30 days' notice. Every tenant declined to provide a forwarding address. It is a revolving door, she said, but it is a quiet one. I tried to leave. I don't mean permanently. I tried to leave the house empty for 3 days. I drove to Springfield. I stayed in a motel. I left nothing behind except the furniture, which was too heavy to move. I packed a bag the way you pack when you are not sure you are coming back. Clothes for 3 days. My book, my toiletry bag. I left everything else. The coffee maker, the mugs, the towels, all of it, because I wanted to test something. I wanted to see what the house would do with my things when I wasn't there to correct them. I thought, if the house is doing this, maybe it needs material. Maybe it needs my things to work with. Maybe if I take everything away, it'll stop. I came back on a Thursday afternoon. I unlocked the front door and I stepped inside. My coffee maker was on the counter. My mugs were in the cabinet, the wrong one, handles left. My towels were in the linen closet, folded in thirds. My books were on the nightstand, stacked in an order I didn't recognize. My clothes were in the closet. The door open 18 inches on the right. Everything I had taken was back. Not everything I owned. Just the things that belonged inside the house's routine. The coffee maker was placed where the previous one had been, slightly to the left of where I kept it. The books were arranged by size, not by the order I was reading them. The clothes were hung with the hangers evenly spaced, more evenly than I would ever space them. I walked from room to room. The house looked like someone had been living in it the entire time I was gone. Not me. Someone else. Someone who had my things but their arrangement, my objects but their habits, my hands but their preferences. The kitchen light was on. The heater in the second bedroom was warm. The hallway smelled like fabric softener. Behind the dryer, the child's shoe sat against the baseboard, laces knotted, pink sole faded. I hadn't brought the shoe back. It was in a dumpster behind the Family Dollar, 20 minutes away. But there it was. I need to tell you about the neighbor, the other neighbor, not Dale. Across the road and down the hill, there was a woman named Margie who I'd seen a few times but never spoken to. She was in her 60s, short gray hair, the kind of woman who watches the road from her porch and knows when every car passes and who is in it. She came over one evening in early April. She brought a loaf of banana bread. She said she'd been meaning to come by since I moved in and she was sorry it took so long. I invited her in. I made tea. We sat at the kitchen table. She looked around the kitchen. She didn't say anything for a moment. Then she said, "You've got it set up just like Shannon did." I felt my chest go cold. I said. I didn't know what she meant. She pointed at the dish soap, left side of the sink. She pointed at the coffee maker, slightly left of center on the counter. She pointed at the mugs visible through the cabinet's glass door, handles left. Shannon kept everything just like this, she said. I used to come over for coffee. She always had the mug ready for me before I sat down, same spot. She tapped the table in front of me. Right there, I looked down at where her finger touched the table. I had put her mug there, without thinking. Before she sat down, we were quiet for a while. I asked her something then. I asked if Shannon ever talked about the house, about anything strange. Margie looked at me. She looked at me the way Dale had, the way Gail had. That look people in this town had, like they were waiting for you to say a specific word and they wouldn't speak until you did. She said it took a while to settle in, Margie said carefully. She said for the first few months, it felt like the house already had a way of doing things, and she just had to learn what it wanted. I asked what happened after the first few months. She stopped noticing, Margie said. She said it got easier. She said one day she just realized she wasn't fighting it anymore, that everything was where it belonged. I asked if Shannon seemed happy. Margie thought about it. She seemed comfortable, she said, like the house fit her, or she fit it. She paused, but I'll tell you something. When I first met Shannon, she told me she didn't like black beans. By the time she left, she was buying them every week. That night, I sat in the living room and I didn't read. I didn't turn on any lights. I waited for 9:15. It came. The silence fell. The heater stopped. The refrigerator went quiet. The clock in the bedroom stopped ticking. Everything paused. And in that silence, I felt it. Not a presence, not a ghost, something more like a shape, an outline. The outline of a life that had been lived in this house for so long that the house had absorbed it the way carpet absorbs a stain. Not a spirit, an impression, a worn groove in the wood that every foot eventually follows, because the path is already there. I thought about Shannon standing at the kitchen window at 7:15. I thought about the heater in the younger daughter's room clicking on at 8:30. I thought about the closet door open 18 inches on the right, enough for a child to see in, to be reassured by the sight of hanging clothes in the dark. I thought about the fabric softener smell in the hallway, warm and sweet. The scent of clean laundry, the scent of someone taking care. I thought about the silence at 9:15, and I realized what it was. It was bedtime. The house was putting the children to sleep. The house was recreating the 4 minutes after the lights went off, and before sleep came, when everything goes still and the house itself becomes a blanket, and the world outside disappears, and you are safe. The house wasn't haunted. It had loved the Colliers, or at least it had loved the routine of them, the daily rhythm, the habits, the small repeated acts that gave the house a purpose. And when they left, the house didn't stop. It couldn't stop. It just kept going, running the program, following the pattern, waiting for someone to fill the shape. And now I was filling it. For about 2 weeks, I fought it. I put the dish soap on the right. I folded towels my way. I hung the bathroom towel tag in. I slept with the closet fully open on the left. I set the thermostat to 62 in every room and taped the dial. I unplugged the kitchen light. Every morning, something had reverted. Not everything, just 2 or 3 things. Patient, consistent. The house didn't punish me for resisting. It just waited. It just corrected. And here is what I couldn't fight, myself. I started catching myself doing things I hadn't decided to do. Wiping the mirror right to left. Standing at the kitchen window at 7:15 and looking at the road. Humming a song I didn't know. A slow, tuneless thing, almost like a lullaby, with a melody I couldn't place. But that felt like it had been playing in the back of my head for weeks. I caught myself folding towels in thirds. I caught myself buying white bread. I caught myself turning the kitchen light on at 6 in the evening and leaving it on until 10:40, which wasn't my schedule, wasn't my habit, wasn't something I'd ever done in my life. But it felt right. That is what scared me. It felt like the natural thing to do. It felt like I'd always done it. The way you can't remember learning to tie your shoes, you just know how. That is what the house's habits felt like inside me. Not foreign, not imposed. Just already there, as if they'd been mine all along and I'd only just remembered. One evening in mid-April, I did something I can't explain. I went to the Family Dollar and I bought a pair of children's shoes. White sneakers, size 3, pink soles. I wasn't thinking about it. I was walking through the store, picking up the usual things. My usual things, or what I still thought were my usual things. And I passed the children's section and I stopped. I picked up the shoes. I held them. They were so light. I took them to the register and I paid for them. When I got home, I put them behind the dryer, next to the vent hose. I placed them carefully, the way you'd place something that belonged there. Then I stood up and I looked at what I'd done, and I felt a wave of something I can only describe as recognition. Not recognition of the act, recognition of myself, recognizing it. Like watching yourself in a mirror do something you didn't tell your body to do, and your reflection looks more natural than you do. I left the shoes there. I didn't take them out that night. The house was the quietest it had ever been. Not the silence of 9:15, a different quiet. A satisfied quiet, the quiet of a house where everything is in its right place. I slept 10 hours. I am still here. I know that is not the ending you expected. I haven't left. I haven't fled. I didn't call a priest, or burn sage, or break the lease. I am still in the house, and as I am telling you this, I am sitting at the kitchen table, in the chair on the left side, which is where Shannon sat, which is where I sit now, because it is where the chair belongs. I could leave, I know that. There is nothing holding me here. No locked doors, no supernatural force, no voice telling me to stay. Just the house, doing what it does, running its routines, warming its rooms, turning on its lights, folding its towels, smelling like someone else's laundry, but I'll tell you what stops me. I don't know which of my habits are mine anymore. I wake up at 6:30. Is that my alarm, or is that when Shannon woke up? I drink coffee from the blue mug. Is that my mug, or is it the one the house chose for me? I stand at the window at 7:15. I have no children, there's no bus, but I stand there, and I look at the road, and I wait for something I can't name, and when it doesn't come, I feel a small prick of worry. Worry that isn't mine. Worry that belongs to a woman who left this house 6 months before I arrived. The thing about identity, real identity, the kind that lives in your hands and your mornings and your small unconscious choices, is that it is not as solid as you think. It is not a wall. It is a path, a worn groove. And when you step into someone else's groove, if it is deep enough, if the house that holds it is patient enough, you start walking their path without knowing you've left your own. I still fold towels in thirds. I still buy black beans. I still leave the kitchen light on until 10:40. I still feel the silence at 9:15 settle over me like a blanket, and during those 4 minutes, I feel something close to peace. Not my peace, but peace. Here's what I know. The Colliers lived here for 4 years. Before them, Ed Perrin lived here for 2 years. Before him, Darlene lived here for 3 years. Each of them arrived as themselves and left as something slightly different. Each of them moved in and slowly stopped fighting the house's arrangement. Each of them bought groceries from a list they didn't write, folded towels in a way they didn't learn, stood at windows waiting for arrivals that weren't theirs to expect, and each of them left. Eventually, when the pressure between who they were and who the house wanted them to be became too much to hold, they didn't leave screaming, they left tired. They left the way Travis Collier left, eyes forward, not waving, carrying nothing that mattered, leaving behind everything the house needed to start again. I wonder sometimes who the house is actually remembering, not the Colliers. They were only here 4 years, not Ed Perrin, not Darlene. Someone earlier, someone from the beginning, someone who lived here long enough and loved their life fully enough that the house learned every detail of their routine and held it the way stone holds the shape of water after centuries of flow. Someone whose morning was a blueprint, whose evening was a template, whose grief or joy or devotion was so consistent that it became architecture. I don't know who they were. I'll probably never know, but I know what they liked. I know their dish soap went on the left. I know their closet opened 18 inches on the right. I know they folded towels in thirds and bought black beans and woke at 6:30 and stood at the kitchen window at 7:15 and waited for something small and precious to arrive. And I know, because I do it too now, that at 9:15 every night, they paused, they stopped whatever they were doing, and they held still. They listened to the house go quiet, and in that quiet they felt the house listening back. It wasn't a haunting, it was a conversation, and I've been answering without knowing I was being asked. Last week, I found something. Under the bathroom sink, behind a pipe, in a gap between the drywall and the baseboard, that I never would have seen if I hadn't dropped an earring and gone searching for it with a flashlight, there was a note, a small piece of paper, lined, torn from a notebook. The handwriting was small and careful, not mine, but it looked like mine in the way a cousin's face looks like yours. Similar bones, different expression. I couldn't tell if it was Shannon's or Darlene's or someone before, either of them. I couldn't tell if the hand that wrote it still belonged to whoever it had started as. It said, "If you are here, it has already started. Don't try to clean it out." I did. She did before me. It comes back. Just know which parts of your morning are yours. Hold on to one thing it can't have. That is how you keep enough of yourself to leave when it is time. I read it 3 times. I folded it. I put it in my pocket. I am looking at it now. I've been trying to figure out which parts of my morning are mine, which habit, which gesture, which small unconscious choice still belongs to me and not to the house. And I am afraid that I can't tell. I am afraid that I've been here long enough that the groove is too deep and the path is too worn and my feet follow it without asking. But there's one thing. I fold my towels in thirds now. I buy black beans. I stand at the window at 7:15. I leave the light on until 10:40. I accept the silence at 9:15. I've stopped fighting all of it. But my alarm clock, the one on the nightstand, the one that ticks, the house wants digital. I can feel it. Every night, the clock runs 2 minutes slow, and every morning, I wind it back. The house pushes it toward silence, toward the quiet digital display that Shannon probably used, or Darlene, or whoever came before. And every morning, I wind it back, and I listen to it tick. And I remember that I chose it, that it is mine, that I brought it from my old life, my real life. The one I lived before this house started teaching me someone else's. As long as the clock ticks, I know where I end and the house begins. But last night, for the first time, I forgot to wind it. And this morning, I woke at 6:30 anyway. If you enjoyed tonight's nightmare, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because you never know what's waiting in the dark for you next. Sweet dreams, if you can sleep.